In the summer of 2008, a frantic call pierced the calm of suburban Orlando, Florida. Caylee Anthony, a concerned grandmother, reported her 2-year-old granddaughter, Caylee Anthony, missing. What followed was an 18-month saga that would captivate a nation, expose deep family fractures, and culminate in one of the most polarizing criminal trials in modern American history. The case of Caylee Anthony, Caylee's young mother, would become synonymous with questions about truth, maternal responsibility, and the unpredictable nature of justice itself. Her story began not with an urgent search, but with a series of unsettling inconsistencies. Caylee Anthony's 911 call on July 15, 2008, wasn't just about a missing child, it was a desperate plea laced with alarm over her daughter, Caylee. For weeks, Caylee had offered shifting explanations for Caylee's whereabouts, claiming she was with a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez-Gonzalez. But Cindy hadn't seen Caylee in 31 days. Her daughter's behavior was erratic, her stories increasingly unbelievable. The grandmother's intuition screamed that something was terribly wrong, sparking the initial investigation that would soon unravel a tangled web of deception, leading directly to Caylee Anthony. Caylee Anthony was 22 years old at the time of her daughter's reported disappearance. She was a young woman living a seemingly carefree life, often leaving Caylee with her parents while she pursued social activities. Her initial demeanor after her mother's 911 call raised immediate red flags for investigators. Instead of frantic worry, they observed a coolness, an almost detached quality, that seemed out of step with a mother whose child had vanished without a trace. This initial impression would deeply influence public perception and fuel the narrative that would follow her throughout the legal proceedings. When police began to question Caylee, her elaborate tales quickly crumbled. The nanny, Zenaida Fernandez-Gonzalez, proved to be fictitious. Her claims of working at Universal Studios and a series of other convenient excuses for her whereabouts in Caylee's absence were systematically debunked. Each fabrication added another layer of suspicion, drawing the investigative focus ever more sharply onto Caylee herself. The stark contrast between the desperate search for a child and the mother's web of falsehoods painted a chilling picture, laying the foundation for a case built on circumstantial evidence and a profound lack of candor. A critical piece of evidence emerged when Caylee's white Pontiac Sunfire was impounded by authorities. Her parents had noticed a strong, decomposing smell emanating from the trunk, a detail Caylee attributed to a dead squirrel. However, forensic analysis by Dr. Arpad Vass later identified the presence of chloroform and a unique smell of human decomposition within the vehicle. This wasn't just a dead animal, it was a scent that spoke of something far more sinister, providing a tangible, if unsettling, clue in the expanding mystery surrounding Caylee's disappearance and solidifying the police's suspicions against Caylee. As details of the investigation became public, a storm of outrage erupted. The image of a carefree mother seemingly unconcerned about her missing child fueled intense public scrutiny. Media outlets covered every development, transforming the case into a national obsession. Online forums buzzed with theories, and justice for Caylee movements gained traction. The public quickly formed a strong opinion, and Caylee Anthony became one of the most reviled figures in America, long before a jury was even selected. This widespread condemnation would later create an extraordinary challenge for the legal system. On December 11, 2008, a utility meter reader made a gruesome discovery in a wooded area near the Anthony family home. A bag containing skeletal remains was found, alongside a child's blanket and a plastic trash bag. Forensics quickly confirmed the worst fears: these were the remains of Caylee Anthony. The discovery transformed the missing person case into a homicide investigation. The location, just a short walk from her grandparents' backyard, raised agonizing questions about how the child's body could have gone unnoticed for so long, and what it implied about Caylee's knowledge of her daughter's fate. Despite the discovery, a definitive cause of death for Caylee Anthony could not be determined. The remains were too decomposed. This lack of a clear forensic conclusion would become a crucial point of contention in the trial, making it difficult for the prosecution to establish how Caylee died and, by extension, how Caylee was directly responsible. While the circumstances pointed strongly to foul play, the absence of a specific trauma or poison presented a significant hurdle for prosecutors aiming for a conviction on murder charges, forcing them to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence and narrative construction. In October 2008, months before Caylee's remains were found, a grand jury indicted Caylee Anthony on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. The indictments signaled the prosecution's belief that Caylee was directly responsible for her daughter's death and had intentionally misled authorities. This formal accusation set the stage for a high-stakes legal battle, transforming a missing persons case into a capital murder trial that would grip the nation for the next 2 years, intensifying the public's demand for justice. Leading Caylee Anthony's defense was Jose Baez, a relatively inexperienced attorney who would rise to national prominence during the trial. His defense strategy centered on creating reasonable doubt, challenging every piece of the prosecution's circumstantial evidence. Baez assembled a team that included legal strategists and forensic experts, preparing for a highly scrutinized battle in the courtroom. Their approach would be aggressive, aiming to discredit the prosecution's narrative and suggest alternative theories for Caylee's disappearance and death, despite the mountain of public opinion already stacked against their client. The state's prosecution team, led by Linda Drain Burdick and Jeff Ashton, faced the daunting task of proving Caylee Anthony's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, without a direct cause of death or eyewitnesses. They built their case around Caylee's lies, the presence of decomposition in her car, and her seemingly indifferent behavior. Their goal was to paint a picture of a mother who preferred a life of freedom over caring for her child, ultimately leading to Caylee's demise. The prosecution knew they had to weave a compelling narrative from circumstantial threads to convince a jury. By the time the trial began in May 2011, the Caylee Anthony case was a full-blown media spectacle. Television networks provided gavel-to-gavel coverage, and every detail was dissected by pundits and amateur sleuths alike. The intense public interest necessitated extreme measures for jury selection, moving the process to Pinellas County to find impartial jurors. The overwhelming media presence highlighted the challenge of conducting a fair trial in an era of constant news cycles and instant public opinion, making it one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in recent memory. Selecting an impartial jury for the Caylee Anthony trial was an arduous process, lasting weeks. Given the immense media saturation, finding 12 individuals who had not already formed an opinion about Caylee's guilt or innocence was a monumental task. The chosen jurors were sequestered for the duration of the trial, isolated from news coverage and public commentary, a measure intended to shield them from external influences and ensure a verdict based solely on the evidence presented in court. This extraordinary step underscored the unique challenges posed by such a high-profile case. The trial's opening statements set the stage for the dramatic confrontation. Prosecutor Linda Drain Burdick presented a narrative of a party-loving mother who murdered her child to reclaim her freedom, using duct tape to silence her. The defense, led by Jose Baez, countered with a shocking and unexpected claim: Caylee had accidentally drowned in the family pool, and Caylee's father, George Anthony, had covered up the death, sexually abusing Caylee for years. These two starkly contrasting narratives immediately framed the complex and emotionally charged proceedings that would unfold. The prosecution meticulously presented its circumstantial case, bringing forth over 50 witnesses. They highlighted Caylee's lies to her parents and police, the decomposing smell in her car, the utility meter reader's discovery of the remains, and the presence of duct tape near Caylee's skull. Forensic experts testified about hair found in the car's trunk, similar to Caylee's, and the presence of chloroform. The state sought to construct an unbroken chain of events, arguing that each piece of evidence, though circumstantial, collectively pointed to Caylee Anthony as her daughter's killer, fueled by a desire for a life without parental responsibility. Among the most compelling forensic evidence was a single hair strand found in the trunk of Caylee's Pontiac. Microscopist Arpad Vass testified that the hair exhibited characteristics consistent with post-mortem decomposition, and bore similarities to Caylee Anthony's hair. This, combined with evidence of chloroform vapor and the distinct scent of human decomposition, formed a critical pillar of the prosecution's argument. However, the defense challenged the certainty of these findings, arguing that the science was not conclusive enough to establish an undeniable link to Caylee's death or Casey's guilt, introducing doubt about their exact meaning. Digital evidence played a role in the prosecution's case. Investigators found evidence of internet searches on the Anthony family computer, performed around the time Caylee disappeared. These searches included terms like chloroform, head trauma, and how to make homemade weapons. The prosecution argued this demonstrated Casey's premeditation and intent, suggesting she researched methods to incapacitate or harm her daughter. The defense, however, sought to cast doubt on who precisely conducted these searches, arguing that other family members had access to the computer, introducing ambiguity into this crucial piece of digital trail. The discovery of duct tape near Caylee's skull was a chilling and highly contested piece of evidence. The prosecution contended that Casey used the tape to suffocate or silence her daughter, preventing her cries. They presented evidence of residue on Caylee's skull, suggesting the tape had been applied directly to her face. The defense countered that the tape could have been placed there by rescue workers or animals, or that it became associated with the remains in the decomposition process, arguing it was impossible to prove a direct application by Casey or its specific role in Caylee's death, if any. Throughout the prosecution's case, a recurring theme was Caylee Anthony's seemingly inappropriate behavior following Caylee's disappearance. Instead of reporting her child missing, she was seen partying, shopping, and living a normal social life. This stark contrast with what was expected of a grieving mother was emphasized by prosecutors as evidence of her cold indifference and motive. The defense later attempted to explain this behavior as a coping mechanism for trauma and alleged abuse, but for many, it remained one of the most damning, albeit non-forensic, aspects of the case. Casey's father, George Anthony, gave emotional and often contradictory testimony. He recounted finding his car smelling of decomposition and his search for Caylee. Under cross-examination, he broke down, admitting to contemplating suicide. Crucially, the defense attempted to implicate George, suggesting he found Caylee drowned and then disposed of her body, and that he had sexually abused Casey. George vehemently denied these claims, but the accusations introduced a profound element of doubt and emotional distress within the family, further complicating the jury's perception of events and motivations. Cindy Anthony, Casey's mother, also delivered tearful and conflicted testimony. She recounted the 911 call and her desperate attempts to find Caylee. During cross-examination, she admitted to having searched for chloroform on the family computer, raising questions about the prosecution's claim that Casey was the sole person searching for the chemical. This moment provided the defense with a significant opening, suggesting alternative explanations for key pieces of evidence and blurring the lines of responsibility. Cindy's testimony highlighted the deep pain and fractured loyalties within the Anthony family, a recurring theme. After the prosecution rested, the defense launched its counter-narrative. Jose Baez argued that Caylee accidentally drowned in the family's above-ground pool, and George Anthony, fearing legal repercussions, covered up the death. He further alleged that Casey had been sexually abused by her father, explaining her deceptive behavior and inability to tell the truth. This alternative theory was bold, speculative, and directly attacked Casey's own family, but it aimed squarely at creating reasonable doubt, painting Casey as a victim of circumstances and abuse rather than a cold-blooded killer. A critical point for the defense was the absence of direct evidence linking Casey to Caylee's death. No eyewitnesses, no confession, and no definitive cause of death. The defense argued that while Casey's lies were reprehensible, they did not prove murder. They emphasized that a smell of death or a hair strand, without more, could not overcome the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This strategy hinged on convincing the jury that the prosecution's case, while damning in appearance, lacked the conclusive elements required for a murder conviction, forcing them to consider alternative scenarios. The defense called fewer witnesses than the prosecution, but their testimony was impactful. A computer expert testified that someone other than Casey could have conducted the chloroform searches. A defense forensic anthropologist challenged the prosecution's interpretation of the decomposition evidence. Perhaps most controversially, Jose Baez himself became a de facto witness by asserting the drowning and abuse claims, even though Caylee herself never took the stand to corroborate them. This approach was risky but designed to inject enough doubt to prevent a conviction, shifting the focus from Caylee's actions to potential alternative perpetrators or explanations. Despite the gravity of the charges, Caylee Anthony chose not to testify in her own defense. This decision, while a common legal strategy, fueled public frustration. Many hoped to hear her account, to understand her actions in her own words. For the defense, putting Caylee on the stand was too great a risk, as her history of deception could be exposed and exploited by the prosecution under cross-examination. Her silence, however, left a void, allowing both the prosecution and the public to interpret her motives without direct rebuttal, further solidifying public opinion against her. After weeks of testimony, both sides delivered their closing arguments. The prosecution reiterated its narrative of a calculating mother who murdered her child for freedom, piecing together the circumstantial evidence into a powerful emotional appeal. They described Caylee's lies, the car's smell, and the duct tape, urging the jury to see the overwhelming evidence of guilt. The defense emphasized the lack of direct evidence, the undetermined cause of death, and their drowning/cover-up theory, arguing that the state had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, imploring the jury to look past emotion. On July 3, 2011, the fate of Caylee Anthony was placed in the hands of 12 jurors. Their deliberations would last for less than 11 hours, a surprisingly short period for such a complex and high-stakes murder trial. The brevity of the deliberation process immediately sparked speculation and anxiety among the public and legal observers. What did it mean? Had the jury found common ground quickly, or were there deep divisions? The anticipation for the verdict was palpable, as the nation held its breath, awaiting the culmination of a case that had dominated headlines for years. On July 5, 2011, the verdict was read. Caylee Anthony was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child. She was, however, found guilty on 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. The courtroom was silent, then a gasp. Outside, a collective roar of disbelief erupted from the waiting crowd. The acquittal on the most serious charges shocked the nation, which had largely presumed her guilt. For many, it felt like a profound miscarriage of justice, while others saw it as a testament to the high burden of proof in the American legal system. The not guilty verdict ignited a firestorm of public outrage across the United States. Social media exploded with condemnation, and protests erupted outside the courthouse. Many felt that justice had not been served, especially for Caylee. The widespread public opinion, heavily influenced by media coverage, stood in stark contrast to the jury's decision. This chasm between public sentiment and the legal outcome highlighted the complexities of circumstantial evidence and the demanding standards of proof required in criminal law, leaving a lasting impression on the American psyche about the justice system. In the aftermath, jurors spoke out, offering insights into their decision. They explained that while they found Caylee's behavior reprehensible, the prosecution had failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt how Caylee died or that Caylee was directly responsible for her death. The lack of a definitive cause of death, coupled with the defense's introduction of alternative theories, created enough doubt. For the jurors, not guilty was not an endorsement of Caylee's innocence but a reflection of the legal burden of proof, a distinction often lost in the emotional public discourse surrounding the case. After serving 10 days for the misdemeanor counts of lying to police, Caylee Anthony was released from jail on July 17, 2011, amidst a media circus and intense public hostility. She was shuttled away in a private SUV, her exact location shrouded in secrecy for her safety. Her immediate post-acquittal life was marked by extreme reclusiveness, as she became one of the most hated figures in America. The image of her walking free, while Caylee remained gone, intensified the public's emotional response, cementing her status as a controversial figure long after the courtroom drama concluded. While acquitted in criminal court, Caylee Anthony faced consequences in civil court. She was sued by Zenaida Fernandez-Gonzalez, the woman Caylee falsely accused of kidnapping Caylee, for defamation. Though a jury found Caylee liable, awarding minimal damages, the case further exposed her pattern of deception. Additionally, other civil suits, including one by a recovery company, sought compensation for expenses related to the search for Caylee. These civil actions kept Casey in the legal spotlight, revealing the financial and reputational repercussions that followed her criminal acquittal, adding another layer to her saga. In the years following her acquittal, Caylee Anthony has largely remained out of the public eye. She has given a few interviews, offering limited insights into her perspective, often maintaining that she doesn't know what happened to Caylee. She has attempted to rebuild her life, often moving and changing addresses, finding employment where she can. However, the shadow of the trial and public perception continues to follow her, making a truly anonymous existence virtually impossible. Her story stands as a testament to how an infamous trial can forever alter a life, even after an acquittal. The Caylee Anthony case epitomized the burgeoning age of reality television and 24/7 news coverage. The intense media scrutiny undeniably shaped public opinion, often presenting Caylee as guilty before any verdict was reached. While integral to informing the public, the constant flow of information, opinion, and speculation also raised ethical questions about the balance between press freedom and the right to a fair trial. The case became a case study in how media can influence public perception of justice, and the challenges courts face in insulating legal proceedings from external pressures. More than a decade later, the Caylee Anthony case continues to haunt the American consciousness. The fundamental question of what truly happened to Caylee Anthony remains unanswered for many. Was it an accidental drowning covered up by her grandfather, as the defense suggested? Or was she murdered by her mother for reasons unknown, as the prosecution vehemently argued? With no new definitive evidence emerging, the case remains etched in history as a deeply unsettling mystery, a stark reminder of the limitations of the justice system when confronted with a complex web of lies and a lack of direct evidence. The Caylee Anthony case left a profound and unsettling legacy, a national debate on justice, maternal responsibility, and the often uncomfortable realities of the American legal system. It exposed the limitations of circumstantial evidence and the immense burden of proof required for a criminal conviction, even in the face of compelling, if indirect, evidence. For many, Caylee Anthony remains guilty in the court of public opinion, a symbol of a justice system that sometimes fails to deliver what society perceives as true justice. Her story serves as a somber reminder of a child lost, and a mother forever shrouded in suspicion.